Sorry about that. Here we go. My bad. Okay. Welcome again to coping as I kind of restart for our recording and talking about coping skills and how we deal with our problems and difficulties on a daily basis. So when we experience these different feelings and about our problems, many times we can feel like, I don't want this. I don't want to deal with this. Um, and uh, we have a response to those feelings. Do we, or to that problem? Do we acknowledge the problem? Are we action oriented and try to do something about the problem and fix it? Do we try to avoid it and act like it's not there, or hope that it just goes away because after all, we already decided we don't want this? Do we take a more considerate or thoughtful approach to it and contemplate what our options are in dealing with this problem? Or again, do we simply ignore it? So there's different ways that people can choose to tackle those issues, problems, difficulties. Tackle meaning, how we deal with those problems, how we cope, right? So what does coping look like? Could be some healthy coping that we engage in, or there could be some unhealthy coping that we engage in. Healthy coping might look like taking care of yourself, doing self-care things like socializing, surrounding yourself with a support network, taking on healthy habits like exercise or meditation or walks or art, depending on what makes you feel good and helps you reduce stress. Remember, we're talking about stress and reducing stress too. That's part of coping. Do we do things that distract ourselves from that, like reading, TV, music, doing some yard work? I was thinking about the brief comment that I made about standing in the grocery line, and I think about, maybe some people will grab one of the rag magazines at the end of the aisle and flip through it to distract themselves from the weight of having to finally get to the cash register, or flip through their phone on Facebook or their emails or whatnot. That's one way to try to distract yourself from that stress of having to wait in line, just for a simple example. What could unhealthy oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention some more healthy coping strategies, such as relaxation. People might take time to get a massage, doing stretching. Again, I think I mentioned meditation. Some people have spiritual needs they can attend to as well. Praying and doing a gratitude journal. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that before, but that can be a healthy way to re-examine where you are with a particular situation, and hopefully try to, I guess, without sounding too Pollyannic, look at a bright side and see another way of looking at what you're facing. Some unhealthy coping might look like excessive drinking, smoking, excessive eating. Denial can be good and bad, because denial, we've all heard of denial as a coping mechanism, and denial can be good and bad, because denial is designed to not overload us with that overwhelming feeling of impending doom or sadness or fear. And so some denial can be really actually productive. It's when we stay in that denial and it prevents us from acknowledging what's real in order to attend to other needs associated with the problem. Lashing out towards others or avoiding others. I see a lot of people sometimes withdrawing and not engaging in social activities or surrounding themselves with the support of people who are most wanting to assist them maybe with their problem. So those are some of the things that I hope are conjuring some ideas for you about what are parts of healthy and unhealthy coping. let's see, want to do another screen share. So hang on one second while I move to the next screen. Let's see, how do I go on to this one? There we go. And you see my balloon? Do you see my balloon?
Yes.
Okay. So when we talk about coping strategies, that's pretty much that pin right there, right? So we want to pop that stress and take care of that stress. Now that's a very action-oriented way to do it. So I just wanted to illustrate that point a little bit more, but I wanted to give you an idea that that's our goal, or our aim is to pop that stress. Let's see, what else did I want to? I'm sure I will have other things that pop into my mind. I don't know if I breezed through that part a little too quickly. Does anyone have any questions before I ask Sharon to do some, or Susan, I'm sorry, Susan to do some sharing? No questions? Okay.
Okay. Well, I'm going to cover some other parts of coping, but Linda introduced me earlier, and I've been a practicing psychologist for over 25 years. I have a private practice in Birmingham where I see individuals and do psychotherapy. And I have also had personal experience as a caregiver for 2 family members with ALS. So I'm hoping to provide any added insight and perhaps some shared experiences with some of you. And perhaps we can talk about that more in dialogue form as we continue. One thing I want to underscore is that by the time an individual and a family, because it really is a family diagnosis, receives the diagnosis of ALS, everyone has already been coping. Coping with the ambiguity and the stress. The individual with ALS has been coping with the symptoms themselves, and just the not knowing of what's going on. And then we're faced with how to move forward. There's some different coping styles that I found to be very helpful. Are we getting a lot of feedback, like echoing, or is it clear?
Brian and Nancy, I think you might be the only ones who are muted. Oh, actually, I can mute you. Okay, sorry, I got it. I just went ahead and muted you, Brian and Nancy, just so that we wouldn't have the feedback sound coming through. If you have any questions, I mentioned earlier that there's a chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you want to type in a message, then we can get to that. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that. Sorry.
Sure, no. And please ask questions or share thoughts as they come up. It would be great to have this be, interactive as, proves to be helpful. So I wanted to kind of go into a little more detail with a few coping mechanisms that we found to be very helpful. One of them being problem focused, and this really addresses the problem causing the distress. And examples can be issues with mobility or speech or swallowing. Problem-focused coping includes active coping. So, Linda's cartoon of popping the balloon, this is really kind of going after the issue. And examples of this could be getting a walker or a power chair or a cane, or getting a speech assist device, or thickening agents to help with swallowing. It also involves planning, so doing things we need to do around the home, move debris to make paths easier, getting a ramp built, adjusting our homes, our work environments, if we're able to still work. We've all had to adapt in the pandemic. I know people are juggling work and children and home with ALS. So, adapting to working via a computer, or if one still needs to go in, what type of assistance do they need in order to get to work? All of these adjustments require acceptance, and acceptance can be difficult. It's acceptance of the loss of a previous form of functioning, and that can be hard. That often requires a grieving and mourning of the previous loss, previous level of functioning. And once the emotional processing of that is done and the acceptance is reached, adaptive changes are made that really can be empowering, can help provide a more sense of being able and a greater sense of calm. I worked with a family once, and they needed to get a handicap van, and the wife said, okay, so we figured out this is what we need to do, and they figured out how to financially address it. And the day that they were getting the van, she said she was talking to a good friend and burst into tears. And she said, I didn't even realize what a big change this was, that we were turning in our family car for a handicap van, and what a step forward this was. And she later talked about that van providing such a sense of autonomy and independence for the PAL, for the individual with ALS, and that it also ended up being a vehicle in which their family took trips and had so much fun with, that it really evolved into something great, but the initial hurdle felt big and needed time to be processed. Another type of coping mechanism is more emotion focused, and this really aims to reduce the negative emotions associated with the stress. This can include positive reframing, using humor or religion. If one seeks comfort or guidance from a spiritual leader or through spiritual writings or teachings, this can be a good time to kind of rely on those types of resources. I've worked with a family where the PAL had a great sense of humor, and they used it all the time to really kind of bring some levity to some of the day-to-day stuff that was harder and more difficult to deal with. Social coping, which involves support seeking, aimed at reducing stress, I think is very significant, and one that we have found to be most helpful. It's getting support from the community. I worked with a psychiatrist once who shared the quote, "Help is health." And I have repeated this over and over. I think it greatly applies to ALS. We all have varying degrees of support from family and financial support. And whatever we can do to turn over to other people shores up our own resources, and then allows the individual with ALS, as well as the caregiver, and in particular a primary caregiver, direct their energy toward what needs to be done, how to get through daily activities of living, tackle some of the planning projects and some of the adaptations that need to be handled. So the more help we can get, the better. Examples of this could be having somebody make meals, having people help with children or chores around the house. People are at varying stages of life with ALS. If people do have young children, help with childcare, hire a babysitter, get a mother's helper. I worked with a family once where the husband had ALS and the wife was the primary caregiver. They were very involved in their church, and she worked 3 evenings a week, and their church would come by. They had a whole schedule, and somebody would come by, bring a meal, make sure it was delivered, and spend time with their friend and also the person that had ALS, and really help to make her feel relief and be able to do her work, and the individual to still, be able to function. Some of the organizations that help provide the support can be the ALS support group. Attending that can help us network with others going through similar experiences, but it also can help us find out, okay, who built the ramp for you? Who's helping you handicap your bathroom? Where'd you get that speech device? What do you use to help with that? And I know we live in different areas, but that type of networking can also be very helpful. Again, everyone has different financial resources. Some people, if they're in their senior years with ALS, may have money set aside for caregivers. Other people, that's totally was unplanned for, but hiring caregivers, if possible, can be very helpful. Also, different religious organizations can provide volunteers for a few hours a week to come and help do things around the house. Take the pail somewhere they may need a ride, or just spend time doing things so that the primary caregiver can continue with other things, so that the pail and the primary caregiver can reunite later in the day. Or if there isn't a primary caregiver in the house, some people are living with ALS on their own and having people come in and out as available. Another thing that's very important is continuing to do what we like to do in our day-to-day life. Whether that's having someone come in, and if you are the individual with ALS, you love playing cards, taking you to the ball game, taking you to a movie, continuing to help facilitate things that you really like doing and getting meaning out of life. Same with the primary caregiver. Getting recharged with a friend or things that you like to do really helps sustain us for some of the larger challenges that inevitably come up with this illness. And it helps us feel more normal, more, okay, my life is going on and I'm still enjoying aspects of it. I worked with a family once who wanted to do the ALS walk in September that ALS of Michigan puts on, and they were overwhelmed, and they said, okay, I'm going to ask an extended family member to organize this. The family member picked up the ball, told other friends and family, so that on the day of the walk, the individual with ALS with a primary caregiver just showed up, and then everything else was done for them. Again, that was kind of ideal, but we often forget that friends and family don't know what it is we need and what might be helpful. And a lot of us are uncomfortable asking or saying, could you do for me? You'll find out quickly who can rise to the occasion and who won't. And if you don't ask and delegate, you won't often get the help that you need, and it really can serve you well. We have different support systems. Some people have a big family, and yet they find a lot of their family members are turning their head, or they can't cope with it as well. Go on to the people that can. You would be surprised who your resources might be it in your neighborhood or through your religious organization or through a community group that you hadn't thought of before. But the more help we can get, the better. I also want to point out that the illness progresses uniquely for everyone, and our worlds change. They take different shape. Sometimes they get smaller, but they can also get more meaningful and a little deeper. And I think it helps one kind of slow down, take time and smell the roses, and really reprioritize what's important here. It's allocating resources differently. I worked with a family, and the wife was cutting the lawn. The husband had ALS, and she came back in and said, "I want to go to the zoo. I don't want to cut the backyard lawn." And they had a young child, and they went to the zoo. And I know we can't do that every day. The lawn still needs to get cut, etc. But they really wanted to kind of seize the day and the moment, and that can help recharge us for kind of the long run. Also, don't be afraid to seek individual therapy or medication. If someone's feeling particularly distraught and it would help take the edge off, that is an option as well for coping and getting support. I know we want to open this up for questions and thoughts. So I would love to hear anything anyone wants to share. I know I've shared a few vignettes, and sometimes it can be helpful just to kind of, you might want to do it in a different venue, but it's often helpful just even sharing experiences with other people that have similar ones.
I might also take just a moment, you know, as people might be contemplating what they might want to share or ask about, you know, coping, just to kind of piggyback onto what Susan was saying, you know, talking about support. I have a lot of families that I talk to that say, oh, I've got all these, you know, friends and family who keep asking me, what can I do? What can I do? And I completely agree with Susan that they don't know what your needs are until you express them. And some people have skills that other people don't. Some people are the cooks in the family or the neighborhood who could provide a meal once a week to kind of take that off of your shoulders. It's really it's a gift that these family members and friends are offering. Oftentimes they feel helpless to try to assist you in your situation. So letting them give you that gift of their time or of their, you know, if you, like Susan said, delegating, you know, something to them to do, is their way to show how important you are to them. You know, for many of you, you may or may not know about our respite care assistance program. You know, we will pay for 12 hours a month at up to $18 an hour for you to hire help through a home care agency, which that is designed again to give caregivers a break, you know, to not have, you know, the burden of maybe all the housework, because some of them will do some light housekeeping to kind of try to, you know, ease that burden of additional stress. There are a couple other things online you can check out called Share the Care and Meal Train. And those are both designed to rally, I guess, so a support network in a more organized way. People, you know, there's a calendar involved that's online, and people can plug, you know, there can be sort of a wish list of things that need to be done and days that need assistance and whatnot. And people, you know, friends and family can sign on for those days and times without the caregiver having to call them and ask them and things like that. They, you know, but they organize, that can be organized. Same with Meal Train, same kind of idea, providing meals, as you might imagine. So I wanted to kind of just piggyback onto that. And I had a couple other things that I had forgotten to mention too. And I think Susan may have already mentioned the fluidity of our coping styles and strategies. Sometimes we can approach a problem or an issue with an initial coping skill or a way that we're going to deal with it. But then but we can then find new ways to cope with it. So it doesn't mean that we have to stay stagnant with how we cope with things. Many people will start off with, you know, we talked about denial earlier, and you know, take that approach, but then as some acceptance about their problem or a clarity about their problem or issue comes into focus, they can then strategize maybe different ways to cope with that problem. So it is fluid. I think of, you know, my own situations when I was, you know, preparing for this and, you know, thinking about, well, how do I cope with this or that kind of situation? And what do I normally, you know, that's what made me think about those feelings that are initially generated when you're faced with a problem, and how those feelings then, you know, morph into our actions and how we choose to deal with them. The other thing I wanted to mention too is, you know, a lot of times, and I think Susan may have already mentioned, you know, reframing too. We're talking about your vignette about the accessible van, and you know how it was so profound to have to take on that change, that we are now at this place that we require this accessible van, but then being able to reframe and see it in a positive light, and sometimes the experience itself lended to that because they were able to take the trips, and you know, and all of that. I mean, I think one of the stories I had told Susan was I've had you know, different pals approach the time where they need a feeding tube and feel very ambivalent about that, and sometimes angry and sometimes scared, and what I've heard from people who have then moved on to getting it, they'll tell me how great it was to improve their energy, or they were able to do more, and you know, their quality of life actually in turn was improved with that. And so that was a new way to think about something that they initially dreaded having to deal with. And certainly that's just one example. Not everyone deals with everything the same way. As we talked about initially, everyone has their own you know, we all have a way that we think about problems, and you know, are they things that we feel overwhelmed by initially, and then go, okay, this is how I can handle it, this is how I can deal with it. But one of the key features that I want to pick out about coping is not only how individualized it is, but how you cope is in your control. Sometimes we can't change our problem or influence the situation that we're facing, but what we do have control over and what we can influence is the way we conceptualize our problems and our issues, and then how we choose to deal with them, how we choose to cope. And that's really profound, I think. You know, when we recall that we may not be in the driver's seat of our fate, we are in the driver's seat of ourselves, and that can be very empowering. And I want to just remind everyone of that, of how powerful that can be, because we can control the way we think and the way we act to help our coping improve, I guess, is the way I wanted to mention that. Susan, did you have anything else to add to what I just shared?
No, not to those specific points. I think when you touched on the coping being fluid, it will wax and wane, you know, as the illness progresses. I think, you know, we could be engaging in denial. And I wanted to mention, if a coping mechanism is deemed unhealthy, we do it though because it helps us feel better. So, you know, it's okay in the short term. It's, you know, long term, it's not going to prove productive or supportive. So for a while, we may be in denial or compartmentalizing or avoiding, and then we might go, all right, I got to deal with this new phase of development, or I think it is time to go, you know, deal with X, Y, and Z, and then you feel better. But it is a waxing and waning and a progression that, you know, goes a couple steps forward, some to the side, a couple back, a couple forward, just like anything in life.
Mm-hmm. I think overall, the importance is that whatever coping skill you're using, you know, remember that balloon, the cartoon earlier, whatever coping skill you use to manage your stress, you want that to have a positive effect on reducing that stress, not a negative, not create more stress or prolong, I guess, the suffering of the worry or the problem, or the, you know, the feelings associated with that problem. Any comments or questions or sharings that people want to participate in? We welcome it. That's part of the growth process here. No takers. Okay.
All right, you have a taker.
I have a taker.
This is Brian and Nancy.
Hi.
Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. What's on your mind?
Well, there's a lot. And you gave us some really good tips, and it's just a matter of actually doing them.
Okay.
But my issue is I'm my husband's primary caregiver. We do have somebody coming in 3 days a week, but she's basically just, helps him in the morning a little bit and does some exercises with them and stuff. My issue as we go through this is just navigating all the new equipment and the new pieces that come into your life, and it's overwhelming. We just got his electric wheelchair, and I work at an automotive factory, and I put together cars, and I have a good support with Brian, the wheelchair specialist, but wow, everything you get is so complicated. And I don't understand why we need to have like instruction, like webinars on, some of these items when they come into your life, because it just adds a lot of more stress just to have to figure these things out. And there's an enormous amount of literature and parts and stuff that come with every new thing you get. So any tips on that?
Well, I think it's important to advocate for yourself too. I know you said you work really closely with Brian, and I know who you're talking about. And, I thought that part of the process of getting the new power wheelchair, and I'm just kind of, using that as your example, comes with some instruction on how the item, especially one of that nature works, and what all the bells and whistles do and how you operate it. And if you don't feel like you have a good basic understanding, I think advocating for yourself is a good action-oriented kind of strategy to to get your needs met. And
I definitely do. I am not a quiet person. But this is where my issue lies. He spent a good about hour and a half, 2 hours at the initial visit, and that was just last week. So, and I've contacted him, but also I have this sense of guilt because people have regular lives and regular jobs and their own issues to deal with in their lives. So, that's his job, but he's very overwhelmed too. He's got, I'm sure he has a lot of people that he helps and stuff, and I don't want to be one of those needy people. So that's where I need to get over myself, where asking for help is almost a guilty thing. I don't want to disturb someone else's, with neighbors, same thing. We have a great support system here, but I really do have a hard time asking for help.
I think that's great that you can acknowledge that, because that will help you then go, oh, I'm doing this thing again. First of all, and with regard to the individual, I think that you said his name was Brian, that helps with the wheelchair, that's his job. And the learning curve is steep with all the pieces of equipment. So to have him come back in the beginning a lot is okay. You'll eventually not need him as much,
Right.
Or practice it. If you're the type of person that asking for help is difficult, try it a little bit, push yourself a little bit. Maybe take a look at why is it so hard? See how it goes when you do. You kind of it's good that you can acknowledge that and then nudge yourself a little, because you're going to need help and support.
I know.
And you are just as deserving of help and support as anyone else.
Right. And I've already sent him a long text, and then I realized today was clinic day.
He'll see it when he sees it.
Yeah, he will. Yeah, absolutely.
Don't forget, he's been doing this a while, I would imagine. He knows this. You're
right.
the first person to go, oh my gosh, I know the controls on some of these things. It tilts it back, up, forward. It is a whole huge learning curve. And it can be overwhelming in the beginning. The professionals in those areas are there to help you get it.
Agreed. Did you have anything else, Nancy, or did you want?
No, I'm good. Thank you. That wasn't my doorbell either. We don't even have a doorbell.
No, okay.
Thanks, girls.
Of course.
You bet.
So, Susan, should I share my last screen?
Sure.
Okay. Take me a second here and go. So I want you to take a moment and just read this really, really great quote.
Can you folks hear me or see me?
Yes.
See you, Tim.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go over this quote because I just like it so much. I have it hanging in my office. If you are faced with a mountain, you have several options. You can climb it and cross to the other side. You can go around it. You can dig under it. You can fly over it. You can blow it up. You can ignore it and pretend it's not there. You can turn around, go back the way you came. Or you can stay on the mountain and make it your home. Does anyone find that particularly meaningful for them? Comments about it?
Well, I love this quote. The last line in particular resonates with me because ALS really isn't going anywhere. It comes into our lives or we come upon it. And the choice of making it our home, if you make a home up on a mountain, you have to adapt and you have to accept that this is your new home. Then it offers different vantage points, though, that you never would have had before or that many other people will never get to see. And I think that can be a really helpful adaptive way of living on your new mountain or living with it or making the adjustments that you need to live in a different way.